2022 was a big year for many Dragon Ball characters, but who could have guessed that it would be the time for the classic duo of Goten and Trunks? Finally! That's right, after what has felt like forever, we have finally got them with non-childlike designs. The teenage designs are here and they are awesome. And also very simple, but honestly, I think we'll take anything we can get. However, after their brief, albeit helpful and mostly gag-filled appearance in Superhero, where Gotenks actually did something useful, I mean fat Gotenks, we have now got them on their own little adventure in the latest chapter of the manga. You can check out my review up top here, but suffice to say, it's almost like Scooby-Doo came into the chat, where they take the mantle of Saiyaman from Gohan, becoming Saiyaman X-1 and X-2. We have always said how interesting it is to see their development from their childlike selves to the ones that we know at the end of Z. And we will have to touch upon GT, I know, I am sorry, which won't do Goten any favors, believe me. If you have been with this channel for a while, you know that we, Have and I, do not like GT Goten, especially in the case of Trunks as well. Oof, they did not do good there. We all know where the two of them started though, not counting Trunks' tenure as a baby and his future self, who is a completely different kind of person. You know, having to have a future that's no fun, that would do all sorts of bad things to you. We are introduced to the Goten and Trunks that we're most familiar with as a double act, kind of mischievous though well-meaning, and they're meant to be the mascots for the brand new generation of Dragon Ball fans. Even though that's what Gohan was supposed to do, but I'm guessing it's the new generation of Dragon Ball fans? But yes, Trunks is a little spoiled and is the boss of their little scheme, whilst Goten tends to be the more polite and rational one, and also the most quiet one, though he seems to be often overruled by his buddies, so you kind of wonder, why are they friends? But they don't really change much throughout all the time we see them in Z or in Super, especially Goten, who for the longest time was the least developed member of the Son family. Do you remember the Goku Black saga? For the majority of it, Goten was asleep.
I fell asleep.
You fell asleep?
Granted, yes, the real truth of it outside of the world of Dragon Ball is because Masako, who is in her 80s, was voicing 3 characters. Give her a break. Goku Black, Goku, Gohan. That's a lot of work. Trunks, on the other hand, was a development vehicle for other characters, most notably Vegeta during the Buu saga, and his future self later on, when we realised that time itself was not going to explode and implode within it on itself just because they met, when the most current threat was Goku Black. That, and he has now developed a crush on Mai in the present as well as in the future, which, I guess it helps if you treat her as a character who got a complete and total reset and is someone entirely new, but I know that a lot of you are not going to be able to escape the fact that in there, she's in her 60s. Then we had a big gap going to the end of Z, when we saw a more self-assured and relaxed Goten and a meeker, more polite version of Trunks. What? When did this happen? I mean, with Trunks, it wasn't that surprising because we knew future Trunks was polite, reserved, and calm. Maybe that's just the future now coming to the present. But having said that though, he is a little bit different, as he's not burdened by the sheer amount of duty, responsibility, and trauma that his future self had witnessed, and seems to be more of a goofball overall, not really taking things seriously, but also not being rude and annoying. It's also worth noting that GT placed him as the brand new CEO of Capsule Corp, but it was something that he did more to please his mother and family rather than him actively wanting to become the new boss of the company and any other basic proper ambitions of leadership. Which is really weird actually, because in the double act he had with Goten, he was the leader, so him not wanting to be a leader is a bit paradoxical. What? But hey, he's a goofball and it's done for gags. Especially in GT. But one thing we did realise in GT, he does love his neckties. But one of the big key defining features of present Trunks is that he was often very crass and at times vulgar, but thankfully that trait dropped with age. I don't think we would have been able to tolerate him as an adult. While, as we mentioned, Goten didn't have that much impact on the overall story, and we all got increasingly irritated at him growing up to be a womanizer glued to his phone, that's the GT one, his end of Z personality though was actually rather enjoyable. Not as brilliant as Gohan's, but he was a lot more savvy on the streets than Goku was. It's perfect middle ground of the three. I still feel like something happened between the Buu saga and the End of Z portion that caused both of their minds and personalities to switch with one another, because Goten at the End of Z acts more like Trunks in Buu, and vice versa. I believe that now, thanks to the likes of Toyotaro and the manga currently, we might have just found that particular time in their lives where this mood and tonal shift was about to change, which would explain the mood swing in the original manga and anime back in 1995, and make it even more logical than it would be before. The very atmosphere that led to Goten becoming more confident and forward, and Trunks more reserved and more of a normie who, despite working for a company that excels in engineering and computers, does not know how to use a computer. We flash forward to the latest manga chapter as of now, which is chapter 88, the start of the superhero arc, and something interesting has begun to happen. The two of them are at the perfect middle point between their kid selves and their End of Z selves. They aren't quite there yet, but what has happened en route is actually rather fascinating. It is definitely enough to show you all that the process is definitely happening, and that change in persona that we saw in the last 3 episodes of Dragon Ball Z was not some kind of moment when, oh my gosh, Toriyama forgot who was who. Or maybe it was, and Toyotaro is doing his best to fill in the gaps and make his master look completely competent. Hey, we don't know, but we'll take it. So going to chapter 88, let's talk about Trunks. While he's still the leader of the group, at least for now, he has become more self-aware and slightly insecure, in fact. Again, ironically, he's not that good with computers and gets Goten to do all that stuff for him. But I attribute this really to his impatience rather than any real ineptitude. Like, he doesn't have time to use computers. He's got to be a person of action and do things now. He doesn't care to learn these things. He could, but he doesn't want to. That, in my mind, is how I cope. But regardless of all of that, he seems willing to prove himself, though, but has also gained a sense of justice, as shown when he hit the person throwing a can at a baby stroller. He is also, like his GT self, very reluctant to run Capsule Corp himself, and instead wants excitement in his life. There is also that joke about the ghost, which many people tend to overanalyze and really get their hackles up. It is funny that Trunks had interacted with the deceased before, and that the fusion he is part of uses the kamikaze ghost attack as their main gimmick. But this is such an early Dragon Ball goof that we really should not seek too much meaning in it. It's just a gag. If anything, it only reinforces the idea that many of us were braver as kids when we were completely unaware of the dangers of the world, and our imagination was not constantly thinking, oh, what if my arms fall off right now? Or what if this happens? We didn't think about that when we were younger, and that's a lot more of a common thing than you might think. Also, Trunks bailed on Goten for movie tickets, but at least he seems to acknowledge this and is willing to make it up to his best friend at a later date. The younger Trunks would have done it, and then nothing. Barely an apology, and no kind of means to make it up to him. So progress. Young Trunks would have never thought about it. Now let's look at Goten. He has gone from meek and somewhat overpowered to the more stable one. While Trunks is still definitely the schemer of the two, Goten is correcting him much more often, and keeping his wits about him. He is not afraid to call his best friend out. He doesn't let his emotions get the better of him though, trying to look at issues from multiple angles, and on top of all of that, still support his friend, even when he doesn't always deserve it. Interestingly, he is far less indiscriminate and is not above poking holes in Trunks' logic, and he's actually correct. He also does not need to be at the forefront, letting Trunks be the face of the duo, and is even willing to step back just to save his own friend's secret identity. Back in the Buu saga, Goten did this because, well, he didn't know any better. Now though, Goten is doing this strategically. He is just staying in the background and then waiting for his time to act. It's fascinating how this new iteration of Goten has made being the second fiddle his main strength. He took what was once his weakness and now turned it into his best feature. He went from being a middleman into becoming maybe the most balanced male Saiyan in the Son family. We all talk about Gohan all the time, needing to find balance in his life. Well, we found it with Goten, and that's just from one chapter. This short story alone has given Goten more development than he has received in the last 29 years of his character's existence. Try to wrap your head around that. We truly adore how the boastful little brat, that is Trunks, has become a self-aware young man who does try to do good but is still struggling with his sense of identity. We also love the other one who was always overshadowed by his friend, who has now learned to use this shadow to his advantage and game the system, and has gained a much needed distance from himself and the world, a unique sense of self. Something that we argue, even his father and brother, have still not managed to fully grasp to the same extent. He's done it, and he's not even 15 yet, as Goku and Gohan seem both overly fixated on something. It's also worth noting that they are put up against Dr. Hedo and his early creations, which is a perfect match. It would also be really funny if Saiyaman X-1 and X-2 were part of the inspiration for the Gammas, because if you think about it, their core values kind of actually match. Yes, of course, Goten is not as stern as serious as Gamma 1, so that's a complete differentiation. But there are some parallels that cannot be ignored. But in truth, they have nothing to do with the Gammas. They are inspired by the likes of Clean God. Mr. Clean ain't got nothing on him. So that's the guy we saw in the photograph in the movie where Hedo got his autograph and he went to the convention. Not gonna lie, I like that. That there is something to this character and that he has a name instead of it just being a random superhero. Nice little addition there. Once again, vertical enhancement of stories is so much more engaging. We knew we would be excited to see this story, even if it's going to be on the shorter side, and yes, we would have been even more excited if it came out before Superhero, but seeing how Goten and Trunks have finally gotten to grow, literally and cerebrally, makes it even more satisfying. We hope that we can put the negative memories of GT Goten behind us for good, and actually, finally, give him a proper future that he deserves. It would also be nice if Goten and Trunks were given their own transformations. Have you noticed that we hardly have mentioned Gotenks in this script? Just twice? There is a reason for that, but that's a topic for another discussion. In summary, Goten has grown up to be quite street smart, with a good balance between the pure heart of his father and the analytical mind of his older brother. He is more assertive than his younger self, as seen when he stood up to Trunks and insisted on being a part of the mission to save the world. He also has a good sense of humor, as demonstrated by his quick wit in teasing Trunks about his crush on Mai. Oh, that's another thing for another video. Despite Goten having stability, both he and Trunks still want to prove themselves to be different from everyone else and make a difference in the world on their terms. Overall, it's clear that Goten and Trunks have both grown and developed significantly from their younger selves, and they will continue to do so over the next few years. And it will be very interesting to see where their journey takes them before we then jump into where we see them in the movie. But one thing is for certain, the future is bright for these two dynamic characters. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!